Introducing our next session speaker, Mr. Ike Chioke. Ike has over 28 years of investment banking experience involving strategic advisory in corporate finance, including mergers and acquisitions, project or structured finance, and debt or equity capital market activities. His industry specializations include the telecommunications, media, financial services, and general industrial sectors. His professional experience cuts across renowned financial institutions, including Arthur Andersen and Salomon Smith Barney Incorporated. Ike has contributed to market development in numerous ways. He is the current chairman of the Anambra State Investment Promotion and Protection Agency, ANSIPA, chairman of the Enugu State Technical Committee on Privatization and Commercialization, member of Enugu State Council of Privatization and Commercialization, and a member of Enugu State Economic Advisory Committee. He is a trustee of the American University of Nigeria, National Secretary of the Rhodes Scholarship for West Africa, chairman of the Board of Fitness Factory Limited, and a member of the Board of Sevi Power Company Limited. Ike holds a BSc Civil Engineering First-Class Honors from the University of Ife, Osun State, Nigeria, and attended Oxford University as a Rhodes Scholar, where he graduated with an MPhil in Management Studies. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Ike Chioke.
Patrick, thank you once again for that very kind introduction. I guess it's my pleasure and privilege to be here today to speak to the alumni of CIC Enugu. I've been asked to talk about innovation in education, and I have a few slides that I hope would shed some insight on the subject. My presentation is broken up into 4 sections. I start first with the economic impact of COVID-19, and then we'll look at the opportunity in education itself, and then consider the implications of digitalizing education via technology, before we then end with a case study of a state that has already done put in some of the best ideas in expanding access to education using technology. This is Edo State and a company called Bridge International Academy in Nigeria. I think that when we look where we sit today and consider the economic impact of COVID-19, one would notice that for Nigeria, we have now weaker external conditions, much weaker trade due to the lower oil prices and shutdown of economic activities in many partner countries. Lower remittances. We depend a lot on our brothers and sisters overseas to send us remittances. They too are suffering from COVID-19, and there's much less coming in than before. Capital flight, obviously investors who are in Nigeria have the opportunity to move out, taking their money back, which is further exacerbating the challenges we face. And that's translated into a weaker exchange rate and a weaker external reserve accretion. Some of which you're obviously noticing. This has led to deteriorating fiscal conditions, lower oil revenues, lower non-oil revenues due to the lockdowns, and of course, companies are losing money, higher borrowings due to widening deficits and insufficient fiscal buffers, and obviously the challenge of debt sustainability as the debt service to revenue continues to climb. In addition, you've seen a massive shutdown of economic activity, reduced labor hours, resulting in lower output, companies without cash struggling to survive, and many individuals and households in the informal sector have been disproportionately affected. All of this has led to much more economic misery for Nigeria. So we are now in a recession officially. We're recording the 2nd consecutive quarter of a contraction in GDP, weaker economic growth, increasing unemployment, higher consumer prices. This is all evidenced by the fact that we are at AfriInvest projecting a contraction of GDP as much as 2.9% by the end of 2020. That translates to something like $12.9 billion or 4.9 trillion naira, which would disappear from the Nigerian economy when we count all the losses. But living in a post-COVID world, we see a decentralized and socially distant world. Countries and companies will therefore need to seek to domesticate essential supplies and inputs, although this may imply higher production costs, because clearly the challenge of COVID has taught us the lessons that if you're going to be prevented from traveling overseas for schooling or for medical reasons, you then have to make sure you have options at home. Remote working has gained prominence, and after that, there'll be greater emphasis on working from home. I am in my home, attending this seminar like many people. This is a phenomenon that was not really as prevalent in 2019, but from 2020 onwards and beyond, you'll see more and more participation in work as well as in schooling. Schooling from home and online courses have become now mainstream. That then underscores that in every crisis like the one that we have witnessed with COVID-19, there's always an opportunity. And what could that opportunity be? If you think about the world wars, the Second World War, that led to improved global cooperation. If you think about the global financial crisis of 2008, 2009, that led to tighter banking regulation across the world. And now that we're living with COVID-19, hopefully a vaccine will be much more available in 2021. There'll be permanent changes, and what kind of opportunities will that present? I believe that education itself presents a huge opportunity, particularly for a country like Nigeria, because of the lessons we have learned from COVID-19. It's not that the structures and the technologies were not there up to 2019. It's just that we have now kind of learned firsthand, and everybody appreciated the challenges we face when you're sort of marooned on an island and you have to fend for yourself. And you see with the lockdowns and social distancing measures, that's meant that many primary schools, secondary schools, and universities have had to close. Of course, taking aside the ASU strike, where the universities remain closed, you find that if your schools are not working in a digitized environment like in the 21st century, then there's clearly major challenges they face. If you think about education, you see that sub-Saharan Africa has a massive education gap. And this chart shows you the percentage of male and female who are out of school. Overall in the world, you see that that number comes to, the green bar is for both sexes, the red bar is for females, and the blue is for males. So the average for the world is 17.1% that are out of school. If you think about sub-Saharan Africa, the average is 31.2%. So we're riding at almost 2 times the world average, with the women worse off at 33.6% of women out of school and 28.9% of the men out of school. The ratios get lower when you go to Northern Africa and Western Asia. If you compare to sort of Europe and North America, you find it's only 2.8% of the women and 3.1% of the men that are out of school. Central Asia is still in the single digits, and so is like Latin America and Caribbean. So clearly a lot of work needs to be done in making education more available in our region. Nigeria, unfortunately, has a world record for having the widest education gap. In Nigeria, we have 13.2 million out of school children. And you see them every day when you step out of your home. Either they're hawking on the streets, or they are begging with their mom, or they are doing some kind of manual labor. And this is really, really going to be bad for the country over the long term, because this is the human capital we need to be productive in the future. If you then take a closer look at the southeastern United States, Enugu, Ebonyi, Abia, Imo, and Anambra, cumulative population based on 2018 estimates of 23.2 million people. This excludes the Igbos that are living in diaspora. Either they are a domestic diaspora that is living in outside of the Southeast zone, or living overseas. total GDP of 9.7 trillion naira, 40% of the population are youth, and GDP per capita of about $1,100. When you then go through and look at that, you see that across the states, we are not lacking for schools. You have 2,670 schools in Abia, 3,743 schools in Anambra State, 2,390 in Ebonyi, 2,700 in Enugu, and in Imo, 3,500 schools. And these are referring to all the schools, including, I think this will be the primary school and the secondary schools. With enrollment, of course, Imo has the highest with nearly 2 million students enrolled, followed by Anambra, 1 million, and then Ebonyi, 670,000, Enugu, 500,000, and Abia just under 500,000 in terms of enrollment. But the challenge gets more stark when you look at the education gap. If you think about the education gap of Nigeria, and let me try and explain this carefully. You see, anywhere you see the red, you're talking about North Central region. When you see the blue, you're referring to the Northeast region. The green refers to the Northwest region. The yellow is the Southeast region. The purple is the South-South region, and the gray is the Southwest. And here we are trying to showcase, this is a survey from Demographic and Health Survey of 2018, the percentage of the population that have no schooling or have primary education or in secondary education, or they have more than secondary. And you see that the Southeast is not doing too bad, because when you look at the numbers if you see that Northeast Nigeria has 57.2% of their population that has no schooling at all. I mean, that's a female population of 47.4% of the male population that have no schooling at all. In the Southeast, we are comparatively much better off at 14.2% for the female and 8.7% for the male. When you go to primary, you then see that we have, again, we are performing better. We have 35.4% for the female who have done primary education, 42% of the male have done primary compared to other states. And when it goes to secondary, we continue to improve at 40.8% for the female that have done secondary education, and 39.8% of the male that have done secondary education. But you can see that we're worse off than the South-South region overall, and of course the Southwest region, even if we're better in terms of primary education and secondary education for the rest of the country. And when it comes to tertiary education, again, that ranking persists, where we are the third in line, with the Southwest region having the best performance in terms of the percentage of the population that have done tertiary education, anything above secondary school, compared to the Southeast, where we are 9.5% for the female and 9.2% for the male. If you then come closer and look at the education gap directly within the Southeastern states, and again, you have to again understand the chart. The red bars will refer to Abia State. The light blue refers to Anambra State. The green refers to Ebonyi State. The yellow refers to Enugu State. And the gray refers to Imo State. Comparative advantage, no schooling, you see that Ebonyi State appears to be the worst, with 23.4% of the female having no schooling at all, 14% of the male, no schooling at all. Then in terms of impact, Enugu State follows right behind Ebonyi State. When it comes to primary education, Ebonyi seems to have now picked up with quite a good percentage of the population having done primary, 43.6% for the female, 51% for the male. And then in secondary, they're doing not too badly. I think also Anambra State is doing quite well across the band, with 36.2% of the female having done primary education, 45% for the male, and then continues on to those that are above, that have done more than secondary schools. And you find that the best performing state would be Imo State at 14.6. So overall, in terms of education gap, the laggards will probably be Ebonyi, followed by Enugu State, with Imo and Anambra at the top of the heap. Well, what are the issues? I mean, obviously, when you think of the challenges of education, infrastructure is a major challenge. Lack of adequate learning tools, very poor classrooms. It's been, over the years, we've seen that education has a very small contribution, gets a small allocation from the budget. But we also have to recognize our own failings. There's weaker parenting. Most parents expect teachers to do the job for them. They don't, lend any support to their kids who are going to school. There's not enough monitoring of the kids and how much they are learning in addition to meeting their needs. And also the attitude has become that, okay, exam malpractices is part of going to school. And so even if you don't understand anything, it's fine to go and cheat and pass. So the fact that you have a certificate doesn't mean that you actually understand what you've been taught. Third problem is weak teaching capacity due to the rate of unemployment. Teaching has kind of become a job for the people who didn't get a job elsewhere, which is not the way it's supposed to be. In many of the countries, like in the Scandinavian region, it's only the very best people that are given the opportunity to become teachers. So the first classes, the ones that have distinguished themselves in their fields of endeavor, those are the ones that are given the chance to become teachers. Not like in Nigeria where, if you didn't get a job in an oil company or in a bank, then you then try and get into teaching, to manage, mark your time until you're ready to, launch yourself perhaps into politics. Poverty is a fourth factor, and it's been quite a challenge. Most students attending institutions are based on affordability rather than the ability and capacity of the institution. So it is a poor choice for someone to say that, oh, I have to go to school, but I know that this private school around the corner is really quite bad, but it's the best it's the most I can afford. Rather than a structure which makes education available and affordable across the board for majority of the people. In disciplines, another challenge, the Nigerian educational system continues to see increased exam malpractices, reducing the desire to work hard for good grades. Payment of lecturers to earn good grades is also becoming the norm. It's all part of the really insidious culture of bribery and corruption where everything can be compromised. And even when lecturers want to do the best, they also can be put in a difficult position. And last but not the least is the poor orientation. The absence of proper orientation of the children at an early age in terms of appreciating the value of education can lead to a self-fulfilling prophecy where they continue to denigrate it until it becomes too late and they realize that they have become adults. So how do you fix this? How can we leverage technology to transform education? I think that the starting point will be to kind of create a new policy framework to understand how educational innovation can help. And this will have 5 pillars. The first being governance and institutional development, which would include setting out new education policies and strategy, planning and budgeting for it, and having a system for monitoring performance. The second pillar will be the teacher development and curriculum. Here, pre-service teacher development will be essential. In-service teacher development is critical, and there has to be teaching management systems to monitor the teaching as well as a head teacher training so that there's an overall supervisor in each school monitoring what the students are learning. The third pillar is even more complex, but it's doable. As a group of people from the Southeast, we are very much known for having all kinds of meetings, either it is the church associations or the village associations, but we haven't really focused on community participation and partnerships, focusing on education. The same people, whether it's the Catholic Women's Organization or the Anglican Men's Association, can think of organizing themselves to form partnerships and participation to support the learning standards of their children. So in this case, community participation and school-based management committees need to be developed. Civil society organizations need to focus their effort on that as well, and civil society and private sector partnerships could be invited to collaborate to enable more inclusive education. The fourth pillar will be school infrastructure. There are many schools in the Southeast where it's literally a shed and a building without windows or doors, and the children are sitting on the floor. Clearly, this is not acceptable. So we need better school infrastructure. We need sports and recreation. We need school health facilities. If you build better school infrastructure, you find that the children themselves are incentivized to come. And you want to make it an attractive place for kids to want to come and for parents to want to send their children to. And lastly, there's the organizational development, which is the workforce management, the training and capacity building, and the technology-enabled workforce, as well as using quality data to drive decision-making. And you can see that it's only at the fifth pillar that we talk about technology, because educational innovation is not really a question of throwing technology at a problem. You really need to dimension the challenges and the issues and organize it properly before you can then use technology as a tool to make it more efficient. If you think about how digitalization might fit into education, you can think of 5 angles. There's the innovative technology that can improve the platform for learning, delivery, and accountability and support. Once that starts, there's the data that comes out of it, which is data-driven training and ongoing coaching and professional development. Then there's the science around the learning materials. What exactly should be in the curriculum? What is relevant today for the children to learn? And it's not like, you just take a curriculum that was being used in the 1970s and give it to a child in 2020. We need to continuously upgrade our curriculum to see what we want them to learn, so that a child in primary school is building up the knowledge that will be relevant in the 21st century and not thinking about what was relevant in 1960. We need to have support teams, a 360 all-round view of support infrastructure to ensure that where there are issues and problems, there's a way to manage those problems, and so people don't get frustrated and run away from the new idea. And last but not the least, there's a technology-driven monitoring and reporting. The same technology that delivers the education can also be used for monitoring and reporting. And that would also monitor things like teacher attendance and children attendance. With technology, without technology, you do not know. Many states have easily 5,000 to 10,000 teachers all over, scattered around, up to 20 or 23 local government areas. There's no way for the Commissioner for Education to know which teacher is in class unless there's technology. And with technology, you can actually monitor which schools are working and which ones are not. And working with the community-based associations, you can actually begin to change the way people view teaching. It can't just be, oh, my sister is unemployed, let her be a teacher, and she's checked in as a teacher, even though she lives in Enugu. She's apparently a teacher in Ojiriba, and she never goes to Ojiriba except at the end of the month to collect her salary. This sort of structures cannot work at all. So that if you digitize education, you will see some key benefits, and that will be things like personalized learning. You could customize the curriculum to allow for individual learning speeds and ease of providing feedback to the students as well as the teacher clearly. You can do things like abundance of information, because with technology, there's, the world is your library. You have unlimited access to information online, and you're able to update the content to ensure that the materials are relevant. There's ease of sharing, because once you have information and people are connected, you can share that information in real time and help every student learn at the best pace and the path for them. It's far better than traditional education, provides a wider range of choices to the students to learn, and it has good environmental impact. There's the accountability in students, renders traditional one marker obsolete, grants students the ability to measure their performance in detail. There's a learning opportunity for educators, because teachers themselves need to be educated. Teachers can address individual problems, individually or in small groups. There's also dynamic groupings, workshops, and project-based learning, and the benefits of tracking and reporting. So all these come to the structure of how you can digitalize education can be helpful. And when you think about this, someone will say, but oh, this is radically different. There's no way the average Minister of Education can do something like this. But in Nigeria today, there is at least one state which has actually done it, and this is Edo State. In 2016 or 2017, Edo State partnered with a company called Bridge International Academy, which has an educational tool that they've used effectively in primary schools in Rwanda, in Sierra Leone, in Tanzania. And Governor Baseki decided to introduce them. And here is a picture of 2018 when he was graduating the first batch of teachers that have been retrained in Edo State. This is 7,000 teachers. If you look closely, you see that each of them is holding some kind of green pack. That green pack is like an iPad, which is the teaching tool that they use to teach the kids in the classrooms. So the journey so far, it's been implemented in all 18 local governments of Edo State. It has affected 820 nursery and primary schools in urban and rural areas that are running it. 11,000 teachers have so far been trained and equipped with the technology and the modern classroom management techniques. There are 600 field officers who are managing the quality assurance and the learning development. So far, 250, no, actually I believe it's now over 300,000 students have been impacted in 90% of the schools in the state. And up to date, over 1.5 million textbooks, workbooks, and instructional materials have been delivered to each of these kids. So with that, we're just using data. There's a statewide school census. They know all the schools. They can actually see them on a Google map. There's teacher professional development and management. There's institutional strengthening and resource control allocation, because there's no point sending more iPads to a particular school when there's only 5 teachers there and there are schools that have 20 or 30, they haven't received any. There's informed policy decision making, and you continuously drive quality assurance and learning and development. This is the technology they are using. It's a scalable mobile technology that is adaptable to our own environment. You can see, if you look closely, it's like an iPad. It's not color driven, so it uses a battery that allows it to last easily for 48 hours before the next charge. And then each school comes equipped with solar panels so that at night, the system can charge itself just based on the energy from the sun. It ensures effective training at all levels for change management, tracking the data points collected to make informed decisions, and monitors accountability and compliance. Importantly, there's a scientifically based teacher guides and materials. The teachers have a way to learn what to teach the children themselves, because the teachers are now seen as instructors. Now, we have, and I'm sure that is not peculiar to just the Edo State. Prior to Governor Baseki's intervention, he found out that easily 10% of the teachers themselves were not literate. They could not read or write because they got a job as a teacher because it was something their brother or their uncle, or their local government chairman gave them. So the system enabled them to flush out all the unqualified teachers, because if you cannot read, there's no way you can impart any training on students. So this scientifically based detailed digital teacher guide rolled out for every subject every day. So what happens that in the morning, the system centrally sends information that has been curated for this particular level, whether it's primary 1 or 2 or 3, or this technical college. It sends out information to the teacher specific to that classroom and continuously monitors it. The syllabus is aligned as supplementary to the textbooks for literacy and numeracy. There's accountability and sustainability.
Mike, if you can take another 1 minute or so to wrap up so we leave room for questions.
I'm almost finishing. Tracking attendance and continuous assessment, supporting teacher content knowledge on on-site monitoring, skills transfer to state-owned learning and development, and quality assurance for personnel to ensure program sustainability. And this is the impact. Students attending EdoBest in the first 2.5 months of the program learned the equivalent of 70% of an entire year's worth of instruction in English and 65% in math. The impact of this system in Edo State meant that in one term, the students are learning effectively what they would normally take a year to learn, and that is more efficient. One of the best anecdotes that Obaseki received was from a woman during his campaign who came and told him that her challenge is that the Edo Best started with primary 1 in their school. So she has 2 sons. One is in primary 4 and the other one is in primary 1 going to primary 2. But it's now become apparent that the one in primary 1 can read and write perfectly, while the one in primary 4, who has not had the benefit of Edo Best because it started from the lowest level and it's going up, is way behind. And that's the challenge. Now you start something good and people then want to see how to make it more available. But it's a good problem because pupils attending Edo Best are 500% more likely to receive narration of classroom management, 100% more likely to receive positive praise for their work, 55% less likely to receive corporal punishment, 50% more likely to be guided through independent practice during class, and 200% more likely to receive feedback from the teacher on their work. And teachers were 40% more likely to be teaching a full day than what was previously the case. So at this point, I'd like to pause and invite questions and answers. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ike, for that very illuminating presentation, which has triggered a lot of questions online. And let's see if we have enough time to go through them. I have a question from Mr. C. Ochi, who picked up on what you said about the Scandinavians focusing more on teachers, and attracting teachers. And he wants to know, how do we attract good teachers, and what role should the private sector play in this regard? Let me also add another question. Let me ask a few of the questions and you can take them in whatever order. There's a question from Sir Ojelo, who wants to know, in all of these discussions, the number of models that you've touched on, what should an alumni association like CIC Alumni Association, an NGO of sorts, do to help fix these challenges? What model out there would you put your money on? There's a third question from Collins Igwesi. His question is, there's significant challenges in northern Nigeria. So how do we even begin to tackle those challenges? Because when you look at the 13.2 million people out, students, children out of school, most of them are in northern Nigeria. So how do we even begin to tackle, that challenge in northern Nigeria? And the last question, so that you have some time to address them, is, are private schools necessarily better in terms of teaching and learning? Given that every year, as we see the WAEC results, many of the public schools still produce students who are top performers in WAEC and some of these other standardized tests. So if you can take those questions as we pull in some more questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. How do we attract good teachers and what role can the private sector play? I think that the key thing is just to consider the overall welfare package for a teacher. And I wouldn't say that it's a question of just salaries alone, but professional development. If a teacher has been teaching for 5-10 years and never had any sort of opportunity for training, clearly there's a challenge. If a teacher is a teacher, if you're in a teaching role and your salaries are perennially 6 to 7 months late, you don't have much incentive to be teaching full time because it's clear that you're doing something else in order to make ends meet. So I think the starting point is have a proper assessment of the quantity of teachers we need as well as the quality of teachers we need, and begin systematically to say, okay, this is the cost of living in this particular state. And it's not one size fits all, it varies. Many people that live in rural areas can feed themselves from what they grow in the backyard. But if the government promises to pay a teacher 50,000 naira, for example, and is 6 months late in that payment, that is, just incomprehensible to a private sector company where you know that every month you have to pay your salaries, otherwise your workers are not able to come to work. Just how do they even pay for transport? So there are clearly a lot of issues we need to tackle. But I don't think that it works if you tackle them individually, because you know this system, we have to operate education as a system, and you have to go through maybe the State Ministry of Education, the SUBEB, and all the relevant agencies and tackle it from the top, so you can have an effective pollination of a good idea, and gradually it will then change the framework. And that's, I think, what Governor Basake has managed to do. For the Alumni Association, I think that you can obviously create an island arrangement. You know, if you take CIC as a secondary school and perhaps as a CIC primary school, a primary school within the premises, obviously the Alumni Association is strong enough to, make sure that the staff are well compensated, the staff are well trained, the right equipment is there. So what you then end up is effectively that everybody in Enugu State will then want to have their children come to that state, that come to that particular primary school and secondary school, because they can see the real benefit. The question then becomes, how do you weigh up the competition? Does it become an elitist system because the alumni is only there, or how do you allow ordinary folk to have the opportunity to benefit from that? So a better way might be for the alumni to use their capacity and influence to also push the government to work with trying to democratize education in a way that works for everyone and not just for people that went to CIC. You think about the significant challenges in Northern Nigeria, how do we even begin to tackle that? I have to say that obviously Nigeria has always been plagued by weak leadership, and the focus on the leadership at the moment is not even on the critical issues of human capital development, and in particular education, which should lead that effort. Nigeria as an economy is doing very poorly. The policies that are coming out from Abuja are the wrong sort of policies for the kind of problems we face today. And when you think about the interventions they are making in Northern Nigeria, they are more or less using the same old approach. Oh, let me bring food to them. Let me bring some palliatives, without really focusing on how do I develop the character and the knowledge and the quality of the individual so they can help themselves. And that, when you think about having an emergency, a national emergency to tackle the issues in Northeast Nigeria, you really need to sort of then recognize that things like having an NMPC, absorbing easily a third, maybe a quarter of the Nigerian budget directly before the rest is brought out to share, it shows you that we are not really prioritizing properly in terms of how we should allocate our resources and our effort. And I have to also recognize that one of the biggest challenges for Nigeria is maintaining the state of origin has made it impossible for the right quality of manpower to migrate from areas where there's relative concentration to areas where there's not enough. If at the slightest hit of problem, they're going to chase out the non-indigens, then obviously I don't want to take the chances to go and live in Maiduguri for 8-10 years, and then there's a problem, they tell all the non-indigens to go. And I think that we need to, focus on removing that particular, obviously there's a lot of issues about restructuring Nigeria, but you need to remove that particular one about state of origin and make a Nigerian wherever they're living. If that happens, you see that the concentration of capacity in the South would gradually move to where there are opportunities for growth and expansion in the North. And that would also help, because when you do a Marshall Plan to intervene in education in Northeast Nigeria, you need human capital, you need human beings to come actually and implement it. You cannot import them. And that's one of the challenges that our policymakers are not framing properly. And lastly, you asked the question about, are private schools necessarily better in terms of teaching and learning? No, not at all. The people that set up private schools are recognizing there's an economic opportunity to have a school, and they're there to run a business and make money. They are not necessarily there because they have a passion for education. It's just another business. And you can see that in the results that come out and the standardized results, and you see that those in the public schools often best it. But you also have to think about it from a per capita position. If a public university like UNN has 25,000 students enrolled and comes out with 10 first classes, and Covenant University has only 5,000 students and comes out with 4 first classes, on a per capita basis, Covenant has actually done better. You understand? And those are some of the data points you need to look at. But I think that if you look at the early results from the Edo-based program, what we are beginning to see in Edo State is that, because Nigeria is a peculiar country where a managing director of a bank might decide to put his children in a private school, but you see that the driver of the MD has his children in a private school as well. Because there's not quite enough schools to go around, or they're not in the right location. But what Edo State is testing out is that they're seeing that where they are intervening in the primary schools, a lot of people are moving their kids from the private schools in that neighborhood and moving them back into the state schools. So clearly, when you raise the standards, then people recognize the value. And one of the things that I observed from them, they said, you cannot be the regulator as a Ministry of Education and head of SUBEB, and your standards are inferior to what everybody else is doing. If you're the regulator and also you're an operator, you need to raise your own operating game to such a high standard that when the private schools want to participate, they will then know that, oh, I need to be at a higher level to actually get the students enrollment that I need.
Excellent. Ike, let me get 2 more questions, although we have 2 minutes to go.
Okay.
So I have a question from C. Chibo and Hilary Mbodile on the same issue of corporal punishment. And you had mentioned it, and they want to know, is there a fallout of that where indiscipline might spike? Or is there another approach, that we should consider? And then there's a question from Walter Ngu on, there are lots of issues across both primary, secondary, and university, but if we were to intervene, where's the right spot to intervene where you get, more sustainable results from? Minute and a half.
Okay, in terms of corporal punishment, it's a very complex issue. It relates to parenting as well. If a child is coming from a home where there's a lot of abuse, physical abuse amongst the parents, they may learn early enough to just be difficult children, and there's only so much the teacher can do. So parenting is necessary, but within the school environment, you want to create an environment that is welcoming. Edo State is now beginning to introduce 1 decent meal a day, finding out that many of the kids that come to school don't actually eat. They don't have breakfast. So knowing that there's a nice meal in school is also part of the incentive. And sometimes you see that a child that's misbehaving is not necessarily that they are really misbehaving, they're just hungry. So there are all sorts of issues that create the environment that leads to misbehavior. And so it's clearly a question I can't really address without having specifics around it. But I do feel that the more you improve the environment of the school, the more you improve the infrastructure, the less you have the stress factors that lead to misbehavior. And of course, in any environment, even rich parents have problem kids. You always have the problem kids. And then I'm sure the Ministries of Education can find an appropriate platform of how to discipline students before resorting to corporal punishment or whipping with the cane. In terms of intervention, I think that the best area will be to start at the primary school level. And as you start with that, that's the funnel that you build from the primary school. It's from there that you see the people that go into secondary school. And if you remember some of the data I showed you, the percentages between primary school participation and secondary school participation are somewhat similar. But by the time they get to university, it's almost about only a quarter of the students that have done secondary school eventually end up going to university. And that tells us something that we ought to think about. What's happening to the 3/4 that didn't go to university? Perhaps we ought to think about vocational education as a key component of even both primary and secondary school, so that while these kids are in primary school and secondary school, they're actually learning a trade. So by the time someone is at 16 or 17, they are either a good plumber or a good IT software programmer or a good electrician, you understand? And if they decide not to go to university, they actually have a trade that they can use to give themselves a means of sustenance.
Excellent. Ike, thank you so much. The challenge with these sessions are that there's never enough time to really get into the nitty-gritty of it, but I think you've done a great job in bringing together a very complex subject and sharing it and laying out some kind of a roadmap in less than 40 minutes. So on behalf of CIC Alumni Association, I thank you so much for this presentation. It's unfortunate that you didn't have an opportunity to be a CIC alumni, but we'll still accept you that your brother benefited from that and brought some blessings to your family. And on behalf of everyone, I say thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It is my pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much.
The rest of your deliberations for today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.